Because he's an ex-atheist, and then he became an evangelical.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. We urge everyone out there, become a premium member of the Crusade Channel. You get all sorts of content. You get the King Dude, Mike Church, Rick Barrett, Kennedy Hall, Brother Andre Marie, Frontline with Joe and Joe. So, I mean, it really is something, we're pouring all this money, Joe, out of our pockets as Catholic Americans. We have HBO, we have Netflix. Not that I do, but I did used to. Okay. And I try to support different organizations the best I could and within my budget. And you know what? I support the Crusade Channel. I know you do too. And we encourage everybody out there to support the Crusade Channel. It is definitely worth it. Please, wherever you see Joe and I on social media, help us out wherever you can. Hit a like, a subscribe, a share. Share it with your friends if you think we have anything valuable to say. Primary platform that we're trying to build up is our YouTube presence, which is The Frontline TV. The Frontline TV. If you go there on YouTube, you'll see our ugly mugs. And again, hit like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. And remember, one final thing is that we are on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network. We have a Sunday afternoon. Oh, no, excuse me. We've been moved, probably because of your prayers. Okay. Joe and I are now on twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network. Now, if you live in the Connecticut, Westchester, Northern Long Island area, you could get that at 1350 on your AM dial. But having said that, you could download the Veritas Catholic Radio Network mobile app, and you could see Joe and I. Joe, what have we done? 35 or so interviews up to this
Actually,
point?
I think we've reached the 40 mark. And believe it or not, I think if not this week, it's the following week. We'll be on FM radio soon.
Yeah, so we'll be on FM radio. And again, a lot of that has to do with your support, particularly your prayers, because we are in the hands of our blessed Lord and Our Lady. And that is why Joe and I are having success, because, we have that supernatural help. Okay. And so things are going very, very well, and we have you to thank for it. So now, having said all that, there are, Joe, I'll tell you something, with all the things going on in the world, the last thing I want to think about is that if I say to somebody, Merry Christmas, that's a problem. For the last 10 years, and I've worked in New York City now before 2008, I worked in the city from 1990, early 90s to the early 2000s. Then I came back to Jersey for a while. Then I became a server, and I was working in New York City from 2008 to the present. Not for nothing, Joe. I got to worry about offending somebody if I say, Merry Christmas and the looks you'll get. But now you actually have a situation where the European Union is by law looking to ban the use of the phrase Merry Christmas. Okay. And speaking of the European Union, they're also, you have all these alliances going on over there in Europe, Joe. I mean, look, back in the day, it was what? It was Germany and the Italians, and others. They formed an axis, and before that, and they had all these different alliances in Europe. Well, the new alliance is the European Union against anybody who's against abortion and against the LGBT agenda and against unchecked immigration. You know who falls under that category? Central European countries, particularly Hungary and Poland. And the EU, they have their knives out, Joe. They have their knives out. And we have to talk about that at the Frontline with Joe and Joe, because I'm tired of American politicians that are just so, we have to back our European friends. Joe, the European Union is not our friend. And we're going to get into that in a minute. And by the way, on the Merry Christmas thing, the Vatican had something to say about that. So I'm sure you're going to introduce that. And then we're going to bring it home to America if we have the time. You want to know something, everybody? Charter schools sound real good. They do. And as an alternative, if you put a gun to my head, do I send my kid to a charter school or a public school? Send my kid to a charter school. But at the end of the day, be careful what you ask for. Be careful what you pray for, okay? Because, or wish for, I should say. Charter schools are not Catholic schools. They're not. They don't pretend to be. I'll give them that. But they are not. And they're not the answer for Roman Catholics, particularly in America. The solution is a solution that we've heard from years ago. And we're going to talk about that, how that should be the solution, not charter schools. Having said that, I'm handing it over to Joe Resinello because we have a conversation to have here at the front line with Joe and Joe.
So as Joe said, we're going to talk a little bit about the EU. Thomas Williams basically brings this one to us. He basically states that the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Petro Parolin, has denounced an EU communication manual barring the use, as Joe said, of Merry Christmas in favor of Happy Holidays. Cardinal Parolin said this, and I quote, "Europe owes its existence and identity to many contributions, but it certainly cannot be forgotten that one of the main contributions, if not the main one, was Christianity itself. Therefore, destroying the difference and destroying the roots means destroying the person." The document is titled the European Commission Guidelines for Inclusive Communication. It's a 30-page manual stipulated abandoning any references to holidays of specific religious traditions in favor of generic expressions such as winter break, as well as more gender-neutral LGBTQ-friendly language. Now, as Joe and I were kind of talking about this, I mean, like, it got to just be fair. The EU is a secular democracy. That's how it was set up. But I absolutely agree with the cardinal. Listen, the roots of Europe are Christian, and they're still Christians, i.e., Catholics in Europe. And you can't ban. I mean, I don't understand that. I remember Ben Stein made a comment. Now, obviously, he's a commentator. He's a Jewish American commentator, and he was talking about how, like, if someone said to him "Merry Christmas," he's not offended. It's the same thing with me. I'm not offended by someone like saying, like, in my office, like Happy Hanukkah, or if it's a Muslim holiday, or if it's Christmas. Like, it's the rabid atheists that are offended.
Right.
Or the secular humanists. And
Right.
why should they be allowed to take away our holiday? It's not fair.
Because it's not inclusive, Joe. It's not inclusive. And
But
you
it
want to
is
know
in a
what?
sense, though. It's for them too.
Well, no, it is inclusive in a sense, but it is exclusive in a particular way because we believe in the exclusivity of Jesus Christ. So Merry Christmas, let's say for argument's sake, you're saying that you're celebrating Christ being born, okay, on Christmas, that we're celebrating the incarnation, all right? Then yeah, that's pretty exclusive. Christ is the one who said, if you're not with us, you're against us. Okay. The church is taught outside of the Catholic Church, there is no salvation. Okay. There's a lot of different things that make it exclusive. I agree with you. The message of peace and love and the gospel is extended to all human beings. Okay. But remember, that doesn't, and remember what they mean by inclusivity. Okay. Notice because obviously they're not talking about, let's say, including all religions. What they're talking about is including LGBT. That's it, period, exclamation point. They don't want anything that goes against that. If you say a Merry Christmas, you're going to trigger somebody, okay? They're going to get offended. They're going to accuse you of being violent, Joe, if you say Merry Christmas. This is what the EU has devolved. Remember something, Joe, from the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of the church, all right, around the halfway through the first millennium, you had 1,000 years of basically Catholic Europe, all right? And then Luther came along and torpedoed the whole thing. And ever since that time, ever since 1517 in Europe, you have had a devolution, okay, of European culture, of Western civilization. It has devolved into this tripe, into this garbage that you can't even walk down the street in Italy and say, hey, Buon Natale. Okay, Merry Christmas. Or else they might even, Joe, evidently, if the EU is saying this, that means, I guess, if you violate it, does that mean they want to put you in jail? I don't know. But
I'll be honest with
it
you,
seems to be this way this woman is going.
It goes against the mantra of tolerance. I'll be honest with you. I always say this, like, I stay in my lane in life. Christ proposed. He did not impose himself. The church does not impose itself on people. And frankly, it's my holiday. I should be able to say Merry Christmas. Now, if you don't, if obviously if you're a Jew, a Jewish person, I'm not going to say Merry Christmas to you because you don't
Well,
acknowledge the
yeah, but what
holiday.
if you don't? What if you don't know? I'm sorry, Joe, but what if you don't know what a person is, and it's Christmas?
Well,
It's a
then there
week.
should be
It's a
no,
week
it's no
before Christmas.
foul, no
Then you're a
fair.
person of goodwill, and when you see
Right.
somebody,
Then
you
it's
hold.
like, who cares? Like if somebody, because
Well,
to be
obviously,
honest,
Joe, they care. And
no,
this
but
my
that's
again.
where
I'm
I think people have to say it goes against like just common courtesy. Like, to be honest with you, someone could think I'm Jewish, like based on my profile, like I'm ethnic looking. I've had people say, "Are you Jewish?" Like, no, I'm not. But if someone said that, I'm not offended. Like
right,
like if someone said to me, "Happy Hanukkah," and I'd say, "Well, actually, I'm not Jewish, but I'm not offended by that."
right,
It just goes along the lines of like we've gotten crazy. Like people have gotten crazy. We just don't know how to disagree with people. Why can't people just be like agree to disagree? Years ago, people were like that. Like, in all honesty, just be like, listen, I'm not offended by this. Like,
right.
everybody is crazy. Joe, I swear, things I sometimes read things. I'm just like, where did these people grow up? Like, who raised these people? Like,
Joe, they came up in the European Union. That's where they came up. They came up in this secular swamp. That's where they came up. They were formed in this atheist crap hole that we call Europe nowadays. Okay, that's Joe. I'm being serious. That's what it is. I mean, when you've had now what since the end of World War II, you've had Europe has basically been on a suicide mission since the French Revolution. So you're talking about 200 years or more. Okay, a little bit over 200 years of a what Paul Johnson would have called Europe's suicide attempt. Okay, and they've been trying to kill themselves ever since. And that's what you get. That's where these people like this woman, what's her name, Joe? Helena Dolly. Okay. She's from Malta. All right. That's where these people came up. This is where their ideas are formed in the secular universities in France, in England, in Germany. In other words, and it gets to the point where ordinary people just can't say Merry Christmas, that they're actually considering banning the use of the phrase Merry Christmas. And here, Joe. I mean, this is where it gets funny, though, Joe. Even though there's nothing funny about this, okay? And you're at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Joe, think about it in this communication that this Helena Dalli, Dalli, okay, in this communique, it says the text also recommended avoiding. Joe, you got to catch this, man. You got to catch this, okay? Because we're not crazy here, Joe. I know we are crazy Italians, but we're not nuts, okay? They recommended avoiding the use of Christian names in hypothetical examples, and thus, instead of saying Mary and John are an international couple, one should rather say Malika and Julio are an international couple. Now, let me ask you a question. Where did they buy the crack that they're smoking, Joe? I mean, that would be my question. Helena Dolly, really? So that means if I'm in a conversation with somebody and I'm an Anglo-American, okay? So if I say Maria and John is an international, Malika and Julio, is that make people? No, Joe. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to throw it over to you. Is that designed to make people feel better in some way? Are you really triggered if somebody says in a conversation, Mary and John, they're an international couple, that you need to say Malika and Julio because you have to be inclusive? Joe, help me, Joe,
well,
help me.
I just think people are crazy. I can't like, and frankly, I actually think that this crazy stuff is going to hurt them in the long run. I think in America, the common man who's not insane, even if they're like they vote for Democrats, but they're functioning people, like they get up, they go to work,
Right,
they take care of their kids, they pay their bills. When you start putting forth stuff like that, you're crazy.
right,
You're just crazy. And like it's not relatable. Like that's the biggest mistake, if you ask me. And I've heard a lot of people say this. James Carville said this, Clinton's guy. He basically said the people in the South Side of Chicago aren't speaking the same language as the people at the University of Chicago.
right.
The Democratic Party, if you ask me, has to purge itself of these loonies.
Joe, they're in
It's
power
hurting
now.
them.
Joe, but they're in power now.
No, but that's the bad. But I actually think they are. But I
Right.
actually think the common Democrat, the Joe Biden's ratings are like 36%.
Joe,
Like
I understand that. I understand. Believe me when I tell you that they're in the tank. His approval rating could still be at 36%. In 2024, no matter who he runs against, he's still going to get about 47% of the vote. No, you know where I'm going with that. My point is this. But Europe, let's keep it with Europe for a second. In Europe, Joe, they have all the power. Why? And again, Brexit, I don't believe Brexit actually took place the way the people wanted, the people of Britain wanted to. But let's just assume they did. Look at the problems. Just if by a democratic vote, see, we're told to respect democracy. England said we don't want to be in the European Union anymore. So we had Brexit a year before we had Donald Trump. That has never been respected by the European Union. In fact, it's been fought against by George Soros and everybody else. The reason why I bring it up, Joe, is they have the power in Europe right now. Now, when we get done with this conversation at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to keep it in Europe and talk about Hungary and Poland, particularly Hungary. But Joe, that is the reality of the situation, that the phrase Merry Christmas and others, that this Helena Dali and people like her, okay, they've had to backtrack a little bit, but they're still going to push, okay? This could very well happen in Europe, okay? In other words, in the place like Cardinal Parolin said, he said, Europe gets its identity from the thing is, stop with the wishy-washy Christianity, Cardinal. The Catholic Church built Western civilization on the ruins of the Roman Empire. I give Protestants no credit for that whatsoever. I know people get mad at me, Joe, when I do that. Protestantism gets no credit for that. Okay. The Catholic Church built Western civilization on the ruins of the Roman Empire. So I get mad when these cardinals, well, Christianity, that's too amorphous. Catholicism. And that's ultimately, Joe, what the attack is on. That's why they're doing this. What say you?
Well, I'll tell you what, Europe is failing as a society. They have a negative birth rate. And that's a direct correlation to the turning away from God. I mean, here's the thing. The rules of God, the natural law, we'll call it, just for, a better way to put it, apply to you whether you acknowledge it or not. Christ was very clear. He said, if you do not eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life within you. Societies that turn from God, you could look at this historically, they fail. They fail. Man destroys himself. God raises man out of the muck through grace. Europe it has a negative birth rate. It can't sustain itself. That means. So ultimately, there will be a self-correction organically. Sadly, the reality of humanity outside of putting a gun in front of someone's face, and that doesn't really work a lot of times because, frankly, then the other side becomes just as bad as the side it replaced, but in a different way. It's like a virus. It has to run its course. John Horvath said that very clearly with his book, Return to Order. The prodigal son will return after he is eating the food of the pigs. Eventually, Europe will return, just like America. But it's going to go through a period. It's like a virus. It could be an 80-year period, but eventually it will right itself, because when we live outside of the providence of God, we fail. It's proven historically.
But Joe, but Europe has chosen. Here's the thing that bothers me.
Of course they did.
Europe has chosen to live outside of the providence of God. That's what you're dealing with when you're dealing with Europe. Okay,
and they
fail. Are a completely secular society. Okay,
oh, absolutely.
When a nation like Italy has a birth rate, a replacement or a birth rate of 1.5, I think it's 1.5 kids per couple. Actually, it might be less than one. Statistically, less than one child per couple. That's Italy, where that number used to be over 6, okay, if not higher. When times were arguably a lot worse in human history, families were bigger, okay, then that there's a problem. But Joe, here's the thing, and it's the one thing I understand when people want to be merciful and forgiving, and we always should be, okay, but these people are deliberately throwing over God. And more importantly, they're making that choice not just for themselves, let's say as individuals, these elitists in Europe, they're making that choice for you If you were, let's say, if you're a European citizen, they're making that choice for you. Can you imagine an old Italian lady walking down the street and there's somebody helps her with her groceries and she says to them, Buona Natale? All right. And all of a sudden they get offended. What are they going to do? Throw her in jail? And the thing is, it doesn't even stop there. Now, look, Joe, you know that once in a while we have to inject humor into the show, or people are going to think we're just a couple of angry Italians from Newark. Okay. But the way to inject humor nowadays is just read some of the stuff that they actually propose. Okay. So if you think that, let's say, for argument's sake, this lady, Helena Dolly, all right, she's proposing, obviously, doing away with Merry Christmas in favor of more inclusive language. Okay. Check this out. She has promoted. Now, listen, if you just ate anybody out there listening to us on the Crusade channel, just, gird your stomach a little bit. Dolly has promoted the elimination of the expression husband and wife in marriage ceremonies in favor of I declare you spouses, the article noted, while urging father and mother be replaced by parent one and parent two on birth certificates. Now, Joe, didn't we see this? Now, we're seeing this in Europe, okay? Didn't we see this with Senator Langford and Xavier Becerra? Becerra refused to say the word mother. He said, well, I'm going to have to go look at the law. I'm not asking you to look at the law. I'm asking you, do you believe the word mother? Well, I'm going to have to look into that, Senator. This is the effing world we live in? And we let them get away with it?
And ultimately, that's the way I say it. Let them, Joe, it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. And frankly, I don't think it translates to the common man. It's not my world and it never will be. If you want to be crazy on your own lawn. I don't buy into any of that stuff. And ultimately, here's another thing. It's going to fail. It's a lock. All of this stuff will fail on its own. It's like with Patrick Deneen said, the left has won. And because they won, the leftist left will basically collapse under its own weight. Their ideas are bad. You can't build a society on sand. It doesn't work. Frankly, that is how I take all of this. It's play the long game. You won the culture, but ultimately you'll eat each other alive. And it's going to happen.
But don't they have to eat each other alive, Josie? A leftist coalition. Look, we're seeing it now. Okay, when you look at, and we brought it up on the show before, when you look at how, let's say, for argument's sake, the transgender crowd is now going after the feminists, okay, you look at what they're doing to Dave Chappelle, and Dave Chappelle's no hero. I don't look at Dave Chappelle as a hero, not of mine, okay, not of yours, certainly. I think he said what was true. I think men are men and women are women, and people are coming after him. He's being defended by feminists, okay? But do you see how their leftist coalition is so fragile? Because they're trying to cobble together everybody, okay? How do you reconcile with a black person who doesn't care? Because American blacks, if you want to keep it in America for a second, in other words, is part of, in their mind, a leftist coalition. What do you do in America when 20% of African Americans turn around to them and say, I don't agree with all this nonsense? I don't agree. Kanye West got up there and says they're teaching us how to kill our babies. I don't agree with that. How many African Americans, let's say, are against gay marriage to this day? They're not for gay marriage. They can't stand it. They think it's disgusting, and they think it doesn't even exist because there is no such thing as gay marriage, okay? But their coalition can easily fall apart because they have competing interests on their side. The problem is nobody exploits it. And really, like conservatives, Joe, they don't get in there when they see these fissures in the supposed wall of theirs and really try to blow those fissures up a little bit. You know what I mean? And create, let's say, some major inroads. We just sit on our hands. Conservatives sit on their hands. Now, I agree with you. Eventually, it falls apart. Eventually, Joe, after they kill all of us, they're going to have to start killing each other. Okay, because that's the way revolutions work. They're going to have to turn inward. You and I might not be around to see it, and certainly we hope to God and pray to God that they never succeed in their revolution. But if they do, I'd love to be a fly on the wall because they're all going to start killing each other because they have too many competing interests. But as you said, Joe, it's all built on sand. It cannot stand.
Well, I know it won't stand. It's like anything that any sinful lifestyle doesn't sustain itself. I mean, I've seen that in my own life. People that I've known, like sinful lifestyles don't last. Christ was very clear on this. This stuff will fail. Ultimately, I honestly, I mean, the good thing about this country versus, say, the EU. This is not we're not perfect, as we all know, but there is still the courts. Are they perfect? No.
We're
But there
about to
are
find out.
but well, either way, I mean, there are checks and balances in this country. Are they perfect? No. Um, and frankly, we're not there yet where we're looking down the barrel of a gun. I mean, could it happen?
Right.
Sure. It's
Right.
happened in societies. Could it happen? Yes, it could. It's not here now. I mean, we
Right.
live in the bluest of blue states, New Jersey. I'll be honest with you. We do this show. We've done it for 3 years. I still do it. I speak very clearly. I'm unapologetically Catholic. Unapologetically Catholic in my neighborhood. People know I'm Catholic at work. I go to mass. I mean, like, I'm still, no one's locked me up. Not yet. You know
Not
what I'm
yet.
saying? But my
No, you're
point is, like it could happen. But like, my thing is this, as my church has said, you have to just live in your own little fiefdom. You have to live your life, like raise your kids. Obviously, we're in the world, but like, I don't get involved. Like, if you want to destroy yourself, I'll talk to you. I wish you wouldn't, but I am not getting involved in it.
Joe.
Now,
Joe, let me give you an example. Let me give you a quick, because we're gonna talk a little bit about Hungary, but let me give you an example. Under the Roman Empire. Now, this is the difference between the current, let's say, authoritarians, okay, and let's say the Romans. Under the Roman Empire, if you were a province, okay, you were governed. All right, Judea had Pontius Pilate. We mentioned Pilate every week in the creed. Okay, we know who Pontius Pilate was. Every province had a governor. You had to live according to Roman law as far as the civil structure of society. In other words, that's the way that had to be. You had to pay tribute to the emperor. Okay, so you had to pay your taxes, and basically you had to look at the emperor as a god. Okay, almost not even almost emperor worship. Okay, now let's leave that aside. Other than that, Rome didn't care what you did. If you did those things, if you paid your taxes and you looked at, let's say, for argument's sake, Augustus Caesar or Tiberius Caesar as a god, then for the most part, it was live and let live. We don't care about your religion. We don't care about what you do. Okay. We're going to maintain order. We're going to collect taxes and you're going to worship the Roman emperor. Okay. In other words, and outside of that, we really don't care. The difference is you actually had provinces under the Roman Empire that let's say, that lived according to that. Again, I'm not making it, it's not an ideal. It's certainly not anything we could live under. But they had a lot more freedom under Rome than, let's say, what the European Union is trying to do, because they won't let you, Joe, employ that localism that you're talking about. That, let's say, I want to worry about my family, my neighborhood, my community, my municipality, or my county, or something like that, and leave me alone. The difference in why I bring up Rome is this crop of characters, this horrid crew, they don't want to leave you alone. They will force themselves on you, and we're seeing it. Joe, that's one of the reasons why, I don't need to tell you this, that's one of the reasons why you and I are here, is because they won't let us alone. They won't let us worship our God. They won't let us teach our kids what we want them to learn. They won't leave us alone and give us, let's say, when it comes to taxes. They won't leave us alone with all of these things. You have to accept it, even in your home. And Joe, don't make no mistake about it. It will be sooner or later in your home that you're going to you won't be able to talk this way. You won't. I firmly believe that.
it could happen that way. I mean, there's obviously been oppressive societies. And to be honest with you, Gandhi said it again. I'll revert back. People like that last for a time, but they don't last forever. Like,
Right.
clearly, we're here. I've said this. Father John Hardin said this. We're here as Catholics to know the truth, speak the truth, live the truth, and suffer for the truth. If it came for that, then I just suffer for the truth.
Right. Right.
I mean, it comes right down to that. But here's the thing. I've said this time and time again. If I was ever arrested for, say, this show, for being a Roman Catholic, for speaking about the tenets of the Catholic Church that I believe in, if I was arrested, my parting words as they took me away, I would say, enjoy your hour, because that's all you're going to get. That's all you're going to get.
Right. Right.
You lost. I'm in the position of victory right now. And that's how I live. I've lived like that from Biden, before Biden, from Obama, from I am a Christian and a Catholic, and Christ rose from the dead. I believe in that, and I try my best to live it. And frankly, I'm unapologetic about it. I don't
Mhm.
shove it down people's throats, but I propose it constantly to
Right,
all because it's the way to live, and it's the best way to live. And
right.
ultimately, is it possible? Sure, it is. But here's another thing, short lived. It was short lived in Poland. It was short lived in Russia. It was short lived in Germany. And it was short lived in Rome. And all of those places got crushed. By who? By the
But
cross.
you're right about that. You're right. Particularly, and listen, Rome was the most powerful empire probably the world has ever seen. And even leaving aside, let's say for argument's sake, pre-Christian times, the first 500 years or so of the Roman Republic, okay? Rome lasted 500 years, okay, as an empire under the emperor. All right. And eventually it came to an end. And, God used the Roman Empire for whatever historical reason God had in mind. Okay. I firmly believe it was because when the Catholic Church was ready to take over the governing apparatus of Europe, okay, then they took over the Roman governing apparatus of Europe. Okay. That's why they had governors and things like that. The church didn't change all that when Rome fell. The church basically just co-opted it and used it for the governance of the church. But yeah, like you said, Joe, look, these these arrogant people, these narcissists, these EU types and their compatriots in America, their comrades in America, Joe, the one thing the prideful never want to admit, Joe, is that they're building their house on a house of sand. See, we know it's a house of sand, but in their narcissism, okay, they don't even know they're building it on a house of sand. And what happens usually is it ends badly for them.
Well, they'll
Okay.
know when they die, Joe, or when
Well,
they're
that's
close
well,
to.
that's the main
No,
thing.
but even when they're close to death, like people who live a good life for Christ, they die well. I've watched people die well. My aunt comes to mind. She died well. I saw her 12 hours before she died. She had basically lung cancer. She couldn't breathe. And she said, "I can't wait for the joy." 12 hours later she was dead.
Mm,
People who build their lives on sand don't say, "I can't wait for the joy," and
right.
mean it. And people in the hospital said, "Your Aunt Lydia was a special person." People I don't even know. So this is what I'm talking about. Ultimately, you will figure that out because ultimately you end too. You end too. Even if you're the head of the EU, you're the
Right.
president of France, you're the whatever. You're
Right.
the grand poobah of the Moose Lodge in Scotch the Tune, wherever
Right.
the hell you are and whoever the
Right.
heck you are.
So Joe,
You
you know what
end.
it is? You know what it is? Somebody ought to grab George Soros in the back room and say, "Listen, George, you're old, you're near death. No matter what technology we come up with, you are going to die. You can never, ever, ever live forever. It's impossible. It's never going to happen." Okay. And if you think your legacy is going to be that you're going to have a number of high schools named after you all throughout Europe and the rest of the world, well, when they cancel you, then your name's going to come off those high schools. So
Of course.
what you ought to do is now, having lived an evil life, because he's an evil man, all right, you need to repent. Now, let's keep it in Europe. You're at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. And we are in the breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing, the Frontline TV. The Frontline TV. Please find that on YouTube. We need you to go there, subscribe to it, like the videos, share the videos, wherever you can to help Joe and I out. Now, here's the thing, Joe. In the European Union, they try to put up this facade that they have a unified voice. They do not have a unified voice. Okay. And one of the voices that's speaking out against them, okay, is Hungary. Hungary. And Viktor Orban, okay? I'm sorry, Joe. Whenever the media says that somebody's a bad guy, my knee-jerk reaction is to say, I want to know more about that guy. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, this comes out of the Federalist. This article basically they're saying that members of the U.S. State Department are supporting an effort to remove Orban from being the prime minister of Hungary. In this report, that comes actually out of the Financial Times, if that's
Mm-hmm.
correct. Also, but the Biden administration left Hungary off its invitation list for a forthcoming international virtual democracy summit, which is
I
so
wonder if I
insulting.
wonder if China's invited to that, Joe. No. I'm not even joking. I'm sure China's invited. That has no democracy whatsoever, and they're being invited to the virtual democracy summit. But Hungary, that is a democracy. Okay, they are a democracy. They won't be invited, and we're supposed to take these effing people seriously. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry,
Well,
I
let's
cut you
talk
off.
about the sins of Hungary. Basically, they're family friendly. It's a conservative government. Women are tax free if they have more than 3 kids.
Wait, Joe, say
Um,
that again, Joe.
if you have
Say that
more
again.
than 3 kids, your family is pays no taxes.
No taxes. You hear that?
Um,
Wait, you hear that, conservatives in America? If a family has more than 3 kids, they don't pay any taxes. You hear that, Ted Cruz? You hear that, all you guys that call yourselves Republicans and conservatives? No taxes for big families. How's that? Go ahead, Joe.
well, they don't do that. I mean, people don't have big families, but that's another conversation. They've defunded universities. They closed their border to illegal mass immigration. They've stopped LGBT programs targeting children as propaganda, and they've cut down on abortion. You know, let's talk about the family piece because I agree with that. Not just
Mm-hmm.
because I have a big family, because as we've seen, a lot of countries are going into a negative birth rate. And frankly, America, and I actually believe part of the reason, obviously, our borders are very weak currently in the South, particularly on the Texas border. And a lot of that is politically driven because they want to turn Arizona and Texas. Clearly, they want to turn it blue. But also keep this in mind. It's the Latinos who have children in America. They're the only people that have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Americans don't have kids. Even successful Americans, they don't have children. I mean, like my wife and I talk about this all the time. We're an oddity when we tell people ask you have 5 kids. You have 5 kids. I can't believe that. Growing up, I knew people who had 5 kids. My friend Steve Garino's one of 5 kids. My friend Joe Romano's one of 5 kids. My friend Edwin Sayung, one of 6 kids. These are guys I grew up with, hung out with as a kid. Nobody has kids anymore. There's wisdom to it because society needs children. And I actually read something, and I want to throw this out to you, Joe. We talk about being a pro-life society.
Mm-hmm.
Governments not only have to have pro-life laws, as in get rid of abortion, but they have to make it where people can have kids.
Right,
You
right.
know, like, and part of that is maybe allotting some of our, GDP towards that, making it easier for people. Because I'll tell you right now, I mean, me and my, wife, we're able to do it, but it's hard.
Yeah.
This is not 40, 50 years ago, Joe.
No, no.
It is expensive.
Right. Well, the
Well,
thing is,
like we're not talking like the Catholic Church puts out what it has to put out, but I don't hear enough of that, like from people, because we're not, dude, it's not cheap
well, the
to
thing
have.
is, listen, Joe, you have, but this is a whole problem that we're talking about in America. And the problem on this front has to do with conservatives. Okay. Stop worshiping the free market. Back off of the globalism. We don't want globalism as Americans. I don't want to trade on an equal basis or get ripped off by China and other countries, Canada and Mexico. I want my workers, my fellow workers in America, I want them protected, because if our wages go up because you secure a border, you promote family life in America. You don't promote LGBT bullshit in America. You promote family life in America. Okay. When you do that, people have more kids, wages go up, Joe, and then you're able to have more kids. A lot of people, Joe, some people in this country are very selfish. They make a lot of money and they don't want to have any kids. You have some people who are again, I'm not excusing it, contracepting and things like that, or backing off or waiting or not having kids right away. Okay. Again, I'm not excusing it, but they're not financially prepared to have kids because they're not making the money that they should, that maybe 40 years ago they would have. You and I on this show have brought up before construction workers' wages 40 years ago compared to now. Joe, they're down 70%, 60, 70%. Construction workers used to be able to raise 7 or 8 kids. Now they can't raise two
No, but
because of
that's
their
what I'm talking
crappy
about. The
wages.
government, and this is where the quote unquote conservatives and the Republicans got to get their. It's good for a society to have children. For instance, India has the largest population of people under 35. They just don't have the economy to
Right.
sustain it. And all of the intellectual capital of India leaves. They go to England, they come to the United States, they go to Australia to make money. The engineers, the lawyers, the doctors. It's to your advantage to have a society that has children. It is. This is a fact. It is an absolute fact. The government, we say we want to be pro-life. Well, guess what? We have to have laws that help people to be pro-life.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have them. We have no, the whole idea, we could talk about this and I don't want to get off base, but like at the same time, Joe, employment at will. How does a family basically dig roots into a community when you can get fired at the drop of a dime? Even if you're a managing director making tons of money,
Right.
how do you possibly in America? How do you have unemployment doesn't cut it, Joe?
Joe, I don't understand why we as Americans, and again, I blame the conservatives. Well, we can't tell the businesses what to do because we're free marketeers. Nonsense. You can't tell them what to do. In other words, at will employees, that means I can wake up one day, just go to work and get fired because my boss woke up on the wrong side of the bed. And legally speaking, he could say, well, you did sign a paper that says you're an at will employee. See ya. This is the America we want. No, this is where sometimes, now again, I don't ascribe any noble motives to socialists, okay? But this is why Joe, I've been saying a long time before we started doing this show, a very long time. The reasons why socialism even exists is because conservatives and Republicans and business people keep chasing the average working person right into their treacherous hands. The American worker would not look to the socialist or even what is now the Democrat Party, which is in effect socialist. De facto, they're a socialist party. Okay. The American worker wouldn't look to that if American corporations did things like do away with at-will employees, at-will employment. Okay. And things like that, where you had reasonable unions and job protection and good wages and benefits and everything else. You'd tell the socialists, who needs you? Who needs you, Bernie Sanders? Notice, but Republicans won't get this through their head. We talked a few weeks ago about J.D. Vance. He went up in front of the Napa Institute, okay? In other words, Dan Lipinski was there, who's a pro-life Democrat. And he says, why aren't Republicans talking like this guy? This guy's talking about workers and taking care of workers as our backbone. Joe, are we going to have big families because of rich people? Or are we going to have big families in America and bring back family life in America through the working class and middle class in this country as it used to be? That's the problem. And you know what? And getting back to it, that's what Hungary is doing. That's what they're doing.
They're smart, and that's what we should do. I'll be honest with you. I live next to Eastern Europeans. I live next to a guy from the former Czech Republic, and my other neighbors from Poland. I tell them all the time, I like your government in Poland and what was going on in Hungary better than what's going on here. I mean, like, it's good for the country, but I put that out there because that's a slant, that's a knock against the Republicans. They don't think that way. Like, again, as Catholics, we're for life, we're for children, we're for family. I got news for you. It's not so easy. Like, if you're not a professional person, like, that doesn't mean that the rules change, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's real easy to say certain things. It's another thing to do it. I've said this many times. Diapers for $50 a box. I'm not talking about everyone driving a fancy car and having a fancy house and everyone having an iPhone. I'm talking about living, eating, paying taxes, living. It's not easy. And that's why people are turning to socialism. Our government, our society isn't for man anymore, Joe.
Right.
It really isn't.
Well, no, it's for man. It's just for themselves. In other words, whereas, let's say, for argument's sake, and yes, I mean, it is important to talk about those, let's say, capitalists in the last 100 years who we can look to as better models. When you look at, say, let's say, a Henry Ford. Now, maybe it was in his own interest to do so, but he said, well, how do I expect these guys produce my car, but they can't afford my car? Well, how am I supposed to sell cars if the guys making the cars can't afford to buy the car? He doubled the wage in the early part of the 20th century. He doubled the
Let me
wage.
ask you that. Was he public at that time?
I don't think so.
Bingo. That's what
That wouldn't
you can't.
right. And that's one of the Wall Street reforms that conservatives need to champion. You back off, you board of directors. I'm the CEO. I make decisions. No, again, that's a whole other conversation. But the point about Hungary, let's get back to Hungary for a second, Joe, because it's important. The culture war is transnational and the battle lines are being drawn. Now, this speaks to what we were talking about. They're naturally ideological as well. On one hand, there's evangelical internationalist liberalism. Now, that's basically, Joe, what we talk about on the show at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, globalism, okay? And on the other hand, by the way, the liberalism, which is imperial in nature and is therefore clashing with localist reactions from Virginia schools to villages in Hungary. See, Sumatra Matra, the Federalist, he gets it. You can make the parallel between what happened in Virginia and what's going on in Hungary, okay? They don't expect, Joe, these powerful elites, once they put the thumb down on you and they try to crush you, they really do believe they're all powerful. They believe that they're as powerful as, let's say, Stalin was at his height, or Hitler was at his height, or Mao was at his height. They believe this. They think everybody's just going to fall into lockstep. And you know what? Hungary's not falling into lockstep. And he ties it into the Virginia schools. The reaction is local. As you said earlier, Joe Rossinello on the front line, the reaction is local. If you're not going to change the country, then leave me the F alone. I'm raising my kids. I want to pay for my own education. You get off my back. In other words, and you can actually find people locally that will come together with you. All right. And that's, again, what happened in Virginia. But it was in Virginia, of course, it was white supremacy, even though the lieutenant governor is a black female, leaving that aside for a second, okay? Which I still don't get that logic employed by Joy Reid and others. So a black female gets elected, but she doesn't even realize that she's a white supremacist. But you see, it's going on all over the world. People are rejecting this elitism, this globalism. And quite frankly, Joe, a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's godless. Because people do believe in God. Maybe they're not all lockstep Roman Catholics,
Joe,
but
do we believe in God? I
well,
mean, our society doesn't reflect it. I mean, like, I'll be honest. Like, here's the thing. To believe in God means you have to go to the fount of all holiness, which is Christ and the sacraments. I mean, only 9% of the Catholics in America go to church. 9%, which means they're not receiving the graces of God. In fact, you're living in mortal sin. That's not my rule. You don't go to church. If you're a baptized Catholic, that's a mortal sin. So, I mean, are we a people of God? I mean, someone said earlier when we were talking about what's it called, the EU, that sin dulls the intellect. It does. It doesn't matter how smart you are. There are many people in blue collar towns, working class towns, who go to church every day. They have more common sense, and their lives are are so much more functional than some of these people. So much more.
right.
So, I mean, like, this is where we're at. We've turned away from God. I always say this, and something you've said all the time, and this is what's gone on in Europe, and it's coming here. And Benedict XVI said this. Politics is downstream from culture. You've said that, and you're 100% right. The politics isn't going to solve our issues. Man has to change his vision. They have to look again to God. And then the society will change, the culture will change, and then the politics will change. There's no politician electable that can fix the problems of America right now.
The only thing I will say is this: in this culture war, because of the fact that they have all the power and the money and they control the means of communication, that we do need government to at least loosen that part of it up. I don't need them to pass laws to do anything against some of these elitists in Hollywood, or I don't want to take away anybody else's right to free speech, but I need the government to step in on that level, Joe Rossinello. We need the government to step in and prevent them from silencing us. And if they prevent them from silencing us, think about it, Joe. If you're on social media, you can't get into certain topics. You're taken down. All right. Our guy Jonathan Ross, okay, with Frontline TV. It didn't result in a strike, but Abby Johnson had mentioned something about something having to do with the vax. Had nothing to do with it. They took him down. He had to appeal it, and he won because she didn't say anything wrong. But do you see how quick they are? This stuff's got to stop. This censorship has got to stop. I don't mind fighting a fight, Joe. I don't mind. But you're not gonna fight and force me to tie my hands behind my back. If you want to fight and your hands are free, my hands are free, then let's go. We'll get into the breach. We'll get into the ring. Okay. But you're not going to use your friends in the government to shut me down, shut Joe Resinello down, shut the King dude down, shut all these people down, E. Michael Jones and the rest of them, because we have unpopular opinions. You're shutting us down because you know that our opinions make sense. Our beliefs make sense. The things we say make sense. That's why you want to shut us down. At least I won't think you were such a punk if you're willing to fight fairly. But they don't want to fight fairly. And in that way, and the reason why I bring it up, Joe Resinello, is that I do want a political response too. I want the politicians that we elect to tell Silicon Valley and to tell the mainstream media, you cannot censor these voices. And then take away their protections. Okay? In whatever way legally you could do it, take away their protections. In that case, at least then it's a fair fight. And when the fight is on, let's go. Because I know we'll win. Why? Because God is with us. Because God is with us.
God always draws straight lines through crooked ones. You know, I mean, we're living through challenging times. It's very hard. I mean, I'm interested to see where this goes in America, particularly what's going to happen with Roe. It's going to be very interesting. A lot of people are saying, real smart people for that matter, that Roe may get overturned.
Yeah.
It has, including Alan Dershowitz, who has said that there's no constitutional basis for Roe. So if Roe gets overturned, that's going to be the grenade pin, Joe. You think what happened in the summer of 2020 was crazy? If Roe v. Wade gets overturned by the Supreme Court 5-4, you are going to see a whirlwind in this country like you have never seen before, ever.
And you know what the problem, you know what the funny or the sad thing, or however you want to look at it, okay? The sad thing is the biggest crybabies will be the crybabies in New Jersey and New York and California, in which case Roe was overturned. It's not going to affect them one bit. It's not going to affect them one bit. If they want to go down to Planned Parenthood at Bleecker Street and Mott Street down there in the city and kill their baby, New York's going to allow them to do it. So that's not going to change for them. But as Father Imperato, who was on our show, said, you have 8 states with triggers. Roe is overturned. Those 8 states can ban abortion completely. In other words, in their laws, he mentioned the Texas law. Texas has a trigger in their law to ban abortion completely if Roe is overturned. Those are the things they're worried about. They're worried about more than half the states, Joe, either severely curtailing abortion in this country, okay, or just abolishing it completely. Say abolishing it completely. And listen, if you're in Illinois, or let's say if you're in Arkansas and you're a girl and you get pregnant, all right, and you go to California to go kill your baby, okay, God help you. God help you. But I'm not paying for it, and I'm not paying your travel expenses. Screw
let's
you.
talk a little bit about what's it called. We wanted to talk about charter schools versus Christian schools, and I want to like talk about this because I think it's important. It's come to the point where to educate your children in a Catholic school is only for rich people. And that's a shame because the public schools know what they're doing. They have an agenda. Let's be real. They do. They're basically putting forth an agenda to our children, both rich and poor alike. Why aren't our bishops making good, solid Catholic education affordable? We did an interview with Jose Gonzalez with the Sophia Institute Teaching Association. He basically said, I believe it was his diocese. I forget. I think it's in Kansas. If you tithe in that diocese, Catholic education is free. You see, that's a bishop that's thinking a little bit because Catholic education is important. You're forming children. I believe in it, Joe. And it shouldn't just be for people who can afford it. It's
Joe,
not fair and it's not right.
No, Joe, I agree with you 1,000%. But one thing I would say to you is this. And Chris Bedford wrote about this in the Federalist. The thing he's saying is this: beware of charter schools. Now, I have a foster son. Everybody knows that. When the time comes, he's in 6th grade. He's probably going to be in a charter school for the next couple of years. But to give me time to find, because we're moving, I won't get into that now, but to find a good Catholic high school for him. But the charter school, I know the person who runs it is a faithful Catholic in a charter school. But Bedford's point is we shouldn't put too much Don't look at charter schools as the solution. And what I want to fight about is this is, again, Joe, I never blame the left so much as I do the right for letting them get away with their nonsense. Okay. What he's saying is, why did we give up on vouchers? Why did we give up? You, Joe, how many times on the show have we brought up the fact that if the state of New Jersey gave a voucher to black parents in Newark, okay, to send their kids to St. Benedict, they would have to give that family, let's say that the mother and father has one son, okay, they would have to give those parents $14,000 to send their kids to send their son to St. Benedict's, okay, rather than spend $28,000 to send their son to Central High School in Newark. The math adds up, okay? In other words, because you're saving the taxpayers oodles of money, okay? You're giving the parents control. They now have choice, real choice in education, because you're basically saying, well, rather than spend $28,000 for your kid to go to that decrepit school, we'll give you 14 grand and you can send your son wherever you want. And we've given up on that. And you want to know why? Because we always allow the left to win the argument. And they've won the argument on vouchers. Joe, I'm going to finish by saying this and hand it over to you. They let Hillary Clinton and people like her say, well, what if a parent wants to send their child to a Ku Klux Klan school? What does that mean, Hillary? like, what does that mean? Like, you're equating sending your kid to Seton Hall Prep with sending them to a school in the South that has a grand cyclops of the Ku Klux Klan as the headmaster? And then the thing is, you're laughing about it, and you're right to laugh about it. You're right to laugh about it. But my problem, Joe, is this. Then conservatives hear a ridiculous, laughable argument like that, and they back down.
Well, Joe, the reason why they don't do that, because the math works out for the people, but it doesn't work out for them because they can't sustain the machine. They need your money. They're not going to just give it up. Right. I mean, like, it doesn't work. It's like Obamacare. He needed the young people to pay for the old people. That's why it collapsed. They need your money to pay for their crappy education, and they're not going to just say no. Like, that's the Joe. I mean, like, Joe, I know what you're saying,
but if conservatives wanted to
do it,
you would have to put Jersey's a mess.
They'll never do it.
Jersey's a basket case because we have a bloated public education system that, in the example we just gave, if you cut that in half by giving out vouchers, okay, you not only give choice in education, you go a long way to actually putting our state back on firm fiscal ground. Okay. And they won't do it. And the thing is, on a federal level,
Joe, the Democrats don't know math, Joe.
Well,
they don't. They
but then they're always telling us how smart they are, Joe.
Why is it that every Democratic city and state is bankrupt? They don't know how. I crack up. Their ideas don't work.
No.
You tell a tree by the fruit it bears. Why is Baltimore bankrupt? Why is Camden bankrupt? Why is Newark bankrupt? Why is New York City next to bankrupt? Why is Illinois bankrupt? They don't know how to do math. Their math is twisted.
Joe, they don't know how to do math.
Story. That's another day.
They don't know how to do math, but what they do know is how to manipulate their politicians to make sure that states that are productive and are on firm fiscal ground, like Florida and Texas and other states, okay, like a state like New York, they know they're going to get federal aid. A state like California, they get federal money. In other words, because they actually get money from the federal government. If the federal government said to the states, "Well, we're not taking any money from you,"
that's exactly what they should do.
Right, Texas, you keep your money. It's you. Listen, you run things on a sound basis. Economically, financially, we're not going to take your money. And if California wants to drive themselves into a financial ditch, then let them. And then they're going to have to figure it out for themselves. In other words, that's what we should have a little bit more of.
I couldn't agree with
Joe,
you more.
Final thoughts, because we got to get going. So final thoughts for the Crusade Channel audience.
Well, well, just speaking about Catholic schools, and you could even tie this into like the EU. We need Catholic education. And frankly, I don't worry too much, to be honest with you, about I see what's going on, but ultimately I don't worry. And the reason why I don't worry, give them enough rope, Joe, they'll hang themselves. We stand on firm ground when we stand with Christ. Build your life on a solid foundation. Live a sacramental life. Pray the rosary every day. Go to confession once a month. You have nothing to worry about. You will thrive in this world and in the next.
Well, Joe, that's a great place to end it. I will just follow that up by saying, you know what we should pray for in America? The entire nation of Mexico was converted to the Catholic faith in 10 years after Our Lady paid a visit there. Okay. Let's pray for our Heavenly Father to send our mother one more time, this time to America, to try to change our nation. We love our country, and we love nothing more than our country changes and changes its ways and moves back towards Christ and his church. We want to thank you all for joining us. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello. Remember, the Frontline TV on YouTube. We'd really appreciate you liking every video, subscribe, share every video you can. Again, if you like it and you want to help us out, we're not asking for money. We're asking for 5 seconds of your time. Just hit a like, a subscribe, a share, and all that fun stuff. And we want to thank you for listening to us on the Crusade Channel, your home for the Mike Church Show, Crusade Channel News, the Barrett Brief, and the Kennedy Profession. From sun up to sundown, the Crusade Channel is the last live radio station standing.